welcome back to the AAA MF YouTube channel. I have a GT4 RS, which I bought in April, and I've always wanted to know what it would be like with the roof down. In addition to that, when I went to Goodwood to see the press car, which is in one of my previous videos, the press team at Porsche said that the Spyder RS has softer suspension, so it's better for UK B roads. In addition to that, the intake on the Spyder RS is now on the outside of the car. So you do not have the direct induction going to the cabin. With my car, you have the induction going in through here into the engine, and the engine is inside the cabin. One of the clever things that Porsche has done is not allowed the heat to come into the cabin, even though you have the engine right behind you. But you do get that wonderful noise, especially when you're going up through the revs to 9,000 RPM. Now, we're really lucky to have this car today because this is one of the very first in the UK. Beautiful spec, and it's got the carbon ceramic brakes. This is the car that I think every Porsche enthusiast has been waiting for. A Spyder with a GT3 engine. Why don't we jump in and see what it's like? So I've had this car since April, and I've done 3,000 miles in the car. I do love it. I really love it. I think the build quality is second to none. I've had no issues at all with it in 3,000 miles. I really like the sound of the engine. Some people complain that it's too loud. I don't find it too loud. You've got the option to drive it without the exhaust or PDK Sport mode, which makes it a little bit quieter than normal. And as long as you're not going to the top of the rev range, it's not that loud. If you're going up to 9,000 RPM, it really screams. It really screams. Woo! Like that. Wow. I mean, going to 9,000 RPM in this car is always exciting. Unbelievable. I still can't believe they put a GT3 engine into the Cayman. I was always hoping they would, but I never thought they would. So, what do I think about the car after owning it for 3,000 miles? I find it a lot of fun to drive. I think the looks are insane. Everyone looks at it, partly to do, I think, with the beautiful indigo blue magnesium wheels. They really stand out. And this stealth wrap I put on it makes it kind of different as well. What don't I like about it? One of the things I don't like is that the suspension I find is a little bit hard for UK B roads. Now, McLaren have amazing suspension on their cars, and it's fully adjustable. You've got 3 settings for the suspension. I don't know why Porsche didn't make this adjustable. Maybe because they thought everyone was going to take it on the track and they didn't need to make it slightly softer on the road. I don't know the answer to that question, but it is a little bit too firm for UK B roads. And the problem is when you're on a really nice twisty B road, it starts to bounce around. Now, most people are going to say, but it's a track car and you don't get bumpy roads on tracks. So that's very true. But I really enjoy hardcore cars on the road. They really excite me, driving raw cars on the road. I don't like going to the racetrack. The main reason being because I'm not insured. My insurance policy doesn't cover tracks. And if you want to take out single day track insurance, it's extremely expensive. The weather, it just isn't brilliant either for track work in the UK. if you lived in Florida or you lived in other parts of the world where the weather's better, then yeah, I'd probably buy a car and take it on the track or make sure I had track insurance. But in the UK, you never know what the weather's going to be like. So I'm not a track person anyway, and I find this just a little bit hard for UK B roads. Not terrible, but enough that when you're driving on a hard B road, the car is unsettling, which is annoying for me. When I went to Goodwood and I saw the press car being released of the Spyder RS, I asked the team there from Porsche if the suspension was going to be better for UK B roads, and they assured me that it was, and it was going to be a softer setup. So what's really going to be interesting to see if there is a noticeable difference between this and the Spyder RS. The other thing I love about this is that it feels really rigid. Is the convertible going to feel compromised because you've got the roof going down? One of the things about the Spyder RS that really, for me, is a little bit of a concern is that they've gone and put a manual roof on from the original 987 Spyder. So if you remember the 987 Spyder that had a fully manual roof, and I know because my brother had one and it was really, really tricky. You do get used to it, but it still takes probably at least 2 minutes to do, even if you're quick. And, you know, if you live in the UK, you're driving along and it starts raining and it takes you 2 minutes, you're going to get pretty wet. So again, if you live in Florida or you live in California, having a Spyder RS is just perfect. You can put it in the garage and only take it out when the sun is shining. Here in the UK, when the sun is shining in the morning, it could be raining by midday or the afternoon. But the GT4 RS is a fantastic car. We've done a video with this car against the GT3 RS, and I preferred this mainly because the GT3 RS didn't have the soundtrack, and I felt it was just too big for the UK roads. It was just way too big. And again, I don't do track days, so I don't need a fully race car. And one of the biggest downfalls for me for the GT3 RS was the fact that they've removed the front boot. So now there is no luggage space at all. The lovely thing about the GT4 RS is you have 2 boots, and they're both quite substantial. So if you're going away for a week and you're driving through Europe, you've got a huge boot at the front and a nice big boot at the back. So plenty of luggage space. So we're gonna head back now and pick up the Spyder RS. So what I'm really looking to see is if the suspension in that is significantly different to this, and let's see how the noise compares in both. Is that going to be louder or is it going to be the same? We'll see you soon. So we're now in the Spyder RS. This car has currently 116 miles on the clock. So thanks so much to Warris for lending us the car and being able to experience, I believe, the first one in the UK, or one of the first batch of cars into the UK. Now we've had the roof down already today and it is freezing cold outside. So we're not going to drive with the roof down for filming. Plus, it would be a little bit too loud as well. So the three main things we really want to cover in this car and compared to my car are the looks, the sound, and the suspension. So why don't we start with the looks? Now, I'll tell you an interesting story. On On the way to filming this morning, we stopped to put the roof down, and a guy came over to, when he saw both cars, he came over and he said, "Oh, can I take a photo of your car? Because I've got a GT4." And I thought that he wanted to take a photo of the Spyder RS because it's one of the first ones he's ever going to see in the UK. And he took a photo of the GT4 RS. And I looked at the GT4 RS and I looked at this, and you know, this does look very similar to a Boxster Spyder. There's just no getting around it. It looks more aggressive. It's got the vents. It says Spyder RS down the side. But you could mistake it for a Boxster Spyder. You cannot mistake the GT4 RS for a GT4, for example, because that wing at the back is enormous. I like both of them. I'd really like to have both of them in my garage. But if I was going purely on looks, I actually prefer the GT4 RS. One of the reasons I prefer the GT4 RS in my spec is because it has the indigo blue magnesium wheels, and I think they really stand out. No other car has indigo blue magnesium wheels apart from a GT3 RS. And I think that makes it stand out from all the other cars on the road. This one has black alloys, which, although they look nice and I like the design, they don't stand out as much. Let's move on to the suspension. I can confirm the suspension is softer than the GT4 RS, and I think it's quite markedly better on UKB roads. It doesn't bounce around like the GT4 RS. You still feel all of the bumps in the road, but it's significantly better. Significantly. It doesn't bounce around like the GT4 RS. Still firm, still hard, still a lot harder than a Boxster Spyder, because I share one of those with my brother, a PDK version, and that is softer. So yeah, this is firmer than a Boxster Spyder, but not as firm as a GT4 RS. Yeah, so there is a little bit more give when you're going round corners as well. It's not as tight round the corners. Tiny bit softer, tiny bit softer. The third thing we were going to talk about is the noise. Now, the GT4 RS is really loud, really, really loud. And a lot of people complain that it's too loud. This one is quieter. I think it's quieter because they've designed the scoops on the outside and they're not inside the cabin anymore. With my car, you get the scoops coming into the cabin and the engine is sitting behind you and it just fills up the cabin. The engine noise fills up the whole entire cabin. With this one, the scoops are on the outside. You can still hear that lovely induction noise, and it's a much better soundtrack than the Spyder, the Boxster Spyder. Much better soundtrack. It's a really good soundtrack in this. Yeah, lovely. We can take it up to 7,000 before it's run in. Yeah, sounds really good. Just nowhere near as loud as mine. Nowhere near. So I've driven this car enough now to have some thoughts so that I can compare the two cars. So we're going to head back to base, give you some final thoughts on both cars. We've now been in both of these cars. They're both absolutely amazing. Don't forget, if you're going to buy a new car, go to Magnitude Finance and get a quote from them. I use them to buy my GT4 RS. How do we summarize these two amazing cars? Because they are both amazing. In my opinion, both of them are better than most GT3s. And I've owned a lot of GT3s and I've driven the entire range from Porsche. And I think these are more fun than a GT3. So I'll start with that, and that's probably going to get a lot of comments. But I think they're more fun. I prefer the mid-engine setup, and I love the soundtrack in both of these. I think it's intoxicating. The GT4 RS is significantly louder than the Spyder RS. So if you want to use your car more often, probably the Spyder RS is the car to go for. That said, the roof mechanism on the Spyder RS is absolutely atrocious. You could get used to it, but it's still going to take you at least 2 minutes, if you're lucky, to put the roof up. So if you have a garage, you can put it in a garage and leave the roof down the whole time, then maybe that's an option. Another thing I did want to point out is that the front lip on the Spyder RS is significantly shorter than the GT4 RS, and that's because the GT4 RS has a rear wing. So because it's got a massive rear wing, it needs quite a large front lip. The Spyder RS only has a small rear spoiler, so this can be significantly shorter, which means it's much better around speed humps, and you don't actually have to use the front axle lift. That is pretty good. So to summarize, both are incredible cars. The Spyder RS is quieter, still has a great soundtrack, has better suspension, but they're both amazing. Why don't you let me know in the comments which one you prefer? Thank you for watching. Happy Christmas. We'll see you soon.